So why are we here today? There are a lot of products and apps and services that allow you to control some aspects of how your personal information is collected, is used, is shared, or is displayed. So you might want to keep some information private, and you might be sharing it publicly without even realizing it, like your location, and that can put you at risk. There are many products and services that say they offer privacy and security functions, but unfortunately, they're not always on by default. So it's important to check the settings to turn on those aspects. And so in this training, we're going to go over how to adjust those to control your location data, audio and video recording, and other personal information.
Right. So we're going to start off with a quick poll. And really, we want to get a sense of where everybody's coming from. And yeah, and hopefully we can speak to that in the rest of our webinar. So the poll question is, how often do you adjust settings on social media accounts? If it helps, think about the last time you did it and then last time. And you should be seeing a polls thing pop up on Zoom right now. So we're going to give that a couple, maybe a minute, just so that you all can pick something. And then we will reveal the results.
Yeah, so how often do you adjust your settings? Do you adjust them every day? Do you adjust them weekly, monthly, or rarely or never?
We have somebody that says that they don't use social media. So I would actually then just substitute social media accounts for email or banking things. Just so that it's like the closest thing, right? Like you probably have an email account, and so from there, it's still a social medium.
Got it. We're getting a lot of rarely or never responses. So people who never or rarely adjust their setting on social media accounts. We have, I think that's like 85%. And then we have a few people who are saying they adjust it monthly. That's 9%. 5% adjust weekly, and 2% say they adjust it daily. That's kind of interesting. I think I would have expected more people to adjust it more regularly, just because I know how I periodically change my settings.
How often do you do yours? Are you daily, weekly, or monthly?
I do probably about weekly. Like I'll post something and change the audience for that specific post.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
How about you?
I want to say I'm monthly. There might be small settings that are weekly, but I try not to get lost in it too often, because I think it's one of those things, you get in a settings page, there's more settings, and it becomes a bit of a rabbit hole.
Yeah. Oh, we have a really good question here. Someone is asking, when settings are made, why do the settings need to be adjusted? And the answer to that is that the actual settings themselves change. The companies will push out updates, and they don't always update your settings to what your intention is. And sometimes there's new settings available or new options available that pop up. And so that's why you might need to have adjustments. And someone else asked, which settings are we referring to, which we're going to get into. But can you give me an example of when you advise someone to change their privacy settings and what the reason was?
I think that's a good question. I think my favorite example is actually a really mundane one, where like sometimes, friends will be messaging each other, let's say on WhatsApp, or and then say on WhatsApp, they're beefing, right? They're having some sort of dispute, they're arguing about something back and forth. And in the course of that, some people are often like waiting for people to reply, or they see that like they've been online, but that they haven't replied to them. And I often take that as a moment to be like, hey, maybe you should turn off that setting for you. And when you do that in WhatsApp, right, if then it doesn't broadcast when you were last online, but then you also can't see when other people are last online, which for me, in most circumstances, is just better and more peace of mind. Like, I don't need to know when my friends are online. Like, it's okay. I don't need to have to think about, if they were online, whether they didn't respond or did respond to me on time. I feel like that's just extra information that I don't need and leads to speculation that's unnecessary. And also, right, like in cases where something might be happening or there might be some precarious or dangerous situation, it is better to sort of not have those details revealed. Yeah, say if you want to avoid somebody for a while or you don't want to reply, it doesn't say when you were last online. They might just be like, oh no, they changed their number or something like that.
Uh-huh, yeah, that's interesting. Those are, yeah. I guess like it does seem to like this comes up when there's a change in a relationship or some issue, or like some kind of fight, like you mentioned, where people are like, wait, why are they seeing this in the first place? Um, yeah. I guess the other question is like why do apps want like some of the settings people change that we're going to talk about is like your microphone access or tracking or location. I usually tell people, turn off access to information if you don't need it for the functionality of the app. And you can also use the functionality only when you're using the app. Like if you want your map app
Hmm.
to know your location when you use it, but not all the time. But why do you think apps want this information in the first place?
I think it's a like we obviously hear about like apps want our information so they can sell to advertisers and that whole thing, which is partially true. I do think sometimes like as an app maker, you do just want to know how people use your app. And you want to know where they're at, want to know what they're sort of try to guess as much as you can. And so from a software development standpoint, it's also like if there is a bit of a mentality of if we can get it for free, why don't we just get it from our users? Like there's nothing stopping them. And so I feel like they always lean towards just trying to get it. Like the defaults are always a little bit more permissive than we want. And I feel like part of this webinar is like, yeah, let's take those defaults down a notch so that we're
Right.
sort of be more safe and private.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Like maybe they don't use it right away, but they don't want to have to send a new request out. So they're like,
Yeah.
just allow all the things. But
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
think
Or just like a software engineer that's just like, oh, I have diagnostics. These people are here. Like it's literally it's just fun for them.
right. I mean, I do think sometimes people, when they start getting interested in settings, will panic and be like, why does this need my camera? But sometimes there are non-nefarious reasons. Like if you're using a camera on an app, then it needs access to those images. Or if you're using a mapping app, it might need to know where you are to give you directions from there.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
but yeah, I will let you talk about where to get started if people don't know where to begin.
Yeah. So one of the things, as Yael was saying, it's that it does become easy to get overwhelmed for like, oh, I have a lot of apps, I have a lot of settings, and we're not quite sure where to start. And I think one really good place to start is just with the basics, like your things you use every day, things that are quite important to your life. And so that for most people, most of us is email and social media accounts, right? Like social media accounts, we have our personal photos, emails, we often have important like financial transactions or verification things that go on there. Um, and so that's pretty broad, but even that's a little bit broad too. And so we really want to narrow it down to like which ones we really use the most. Like sometimes I might have like an email account from high school and the one I currently use. And it's like, let's just focus on the one that I'm using right now, like my Gmail account, for example. And then within social media, it's also the same thing of like, which ones are you using maybe at daily or at least a weekly basis? And if you're not, like maybe you don't have to worry about that for now. Um, and obviously, if you are dealing with a specific issue or if you have an issue with a platform, then you might want to change your settings there. Like that's definitely makes it a priority. And for example, like if you find yourself keep having to delete comments from strangers that you don't know, it's like maybe adjusting your settings will make your life easier.
Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, we had a question. Somebody wanted to know once settings are made, why do they need to be adjusted? I think we talked about that a little bit. Um, that sometimes these companies make changes either for good, like they will allow you to have more granular control, or they might just. I don't know if I have a specific instance, but there's times where I'm on an app and I'm like, I could have sworn that I set this to no, and it's on
Mm.
yes. And I think sometimes they change things and then default it again. And then another question is it possible for outside organizations or websites to change my settings? I don't think they will. I don't even know if it's intentional. But if you're on
Mm.
a website from a different browser, or if they've done some kind of update, then it's possible that the settings might not
Yeah,
be
I
the way
think
you want them.
I think it's more plausible that some website will lead me to an account or social network account, and I'll accidentally sort of press the wrong thing and change my setting because like they're telling me to do that, and I'll just be like, okay, I want to do this thing, I want to get this free coupon code or whatever, and so I sort of change it on my own volition. But I'm not thinking of it as like, oh, I went into my Facebook into my settings.
Yeah, I've done it by accident too. Like I think I accidentally stored a password on my browser for my password manager, and I'm like, oh wait, I didn't mean to do that. And there was like a button for it that I hit no 5 zillion times, and then one time I was tired or something, and I hit yes, and I had to go back and fix it. So
Yeah, and Julie brings up like, yeah, sometimes there's dark patterns, and for those of us that don't know, dark patterns is the term where it's a specific design pattern or like in flow in the app or website that gently guides you to do something that we might not want, which includes, for example, being more permissive with our settings and, for example, sharing location. And the dark pattern kind of like guides us to that. I think one of the famous dark patterns that I hear about once in a while is that whole thing where like I think it's like really hard to unsubscribe from the New York Times, and it like you have to end up calling somebody, and it's sort of like that whole thing of like making it hard for you to do something or making it easy for you to do something on the other hand.
yeah, no, I agree. And I think like a lot of privacy settings are really difficult to understand what you're doing. Like they're worded in a way that makes it really easy to get wrong and not do what
Mhm.
you're and so yeah, that's definitely an issue. Okay, and then quick question in the chat. Somebody asked, Lisa asked, can you address whether password managers are safe or a good idea? And we do recommend, Consumer Reports does recommend using password managers. I think Zebra Crossing does too.
Mhm.
Yeah, so yeah, just because it's easier. It's a little off topic, but yeah, it's easier to have a strong, unique password for each account, which you keeps you safe if you use a password manager. So we do recommend. Um,
Yeah, and Kirk has some good comments. I'm not gonna be able to read them for the interest of time, but if people can see the chat, I think it's, yeah, Kirk raises some good points about permissions and updates in Windows.
yeah, things do change during upgrades.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna dive into a quick run through of settings you can change in some of the most common apps. And Apple lets you change what data you share with which app. So an app might want your calendar or your photos or your location or your contact list. And you'll see this when you first download the app and it asks for the data, but you can also go ahead and change it later. So you can open the device settings, scroll down to view each app, and click on each app to view the settings. Um,
Okay, wait 1 second. We're waiting for the
we're
slides to come back to life.
having technical
In the
difficulties.
meantime, we can answer some of these questions. So Alexa JB asks, is it possible to turn off pinpoint advertising? They search for kitty litter but don't want cat-related ads.
I think that I use a tool for that called Privacy Badger that will stop tracking among sites. And so that's one of the tools we recommend in security planning. But yeah, okay, the slides are back. All right, so yes, you can go to settings privacy to see what each app has access to. And you can see through location services that there's some more granular options. So you can share location data. You can either share it never, like you never want this app to have your location. You can share it just when you're using the app, or you can share it all of the time. So those are some of the different options that you have for location settings. Um,
Oh, Marie Stevens asked, please repeat the app you just mentioned. I think we were talking about Privacy Badger, which is a plugin or extension that you can add to your default web browser.
Right, yeah, it's a browser extension called Privacy Badger. So I know.
Anyways, yeah. So while we're typing that in, I'm gonna go through similarly with Android. iOS and Android are similar enough. All the yellow circles in the wrong place, but so for that, with Android, you can look up permissions by tapping and holding an app, and then tapping that eye on the left on that left screenshot. There's like a little eye in a circle, and so you can press that for sort of the information about the app, and then within that, you can believe you can go to the permissions to see what's allowed and what's denied with that specific app. You can also, I think, find these things within the settings, but I find it's easier to sort of locate the app either on your home screen or on the pull-up tray, and then sort of look for them one by one, or look for the ones that you think, that you want to change the settings for. Okay, next. And then on the next slide, I think we have a little bit more. Yeah, so within app permissions, you can see it'll zoom in, and then you can see things like notifications, which you might want to change if it's bugging you too much. In our case, we're going through location permissions. So if you tap on location permissions down there, then it's a similar thing as iOS, right? You can share the location with the app maker, and with sort of online while you're using it all the time, or it asks you each time, or you never do it. And in some cases, if the functionality doesn't work out, there'll be a prompt within the app to tell you to, hey, please turn this on. I can't pinpoint your current location if you've turned me off, for example. But yeah, so that's sort of our a basic intro for like how to look at app settings for each app on iOS and Android.
And we actually have links on some of the more popular accounts so that you control your privacy settings on Security Planner. So if we are missing any, please let us know. But we're going to go ahead and talk about browsers. And this is a sample of a web browser's application settings. And we'll let you pull it up in Safari if you want to follow along by going to settings and scrolling down to Safari in your phone. And there's a lot of different settings you can change. You can block pop-ups, which stops, suspicious sites and ads from being loaded. So you want to turn that on. There's prevent cross-site tracking. And we talked a little bit about other sites tracking your data. And you want to prevent that. So you want to turn it on. Ask websites not to track me. That tells websites you don't want them gathering your behavior on other sites, so they don't always respect that, but you still want to turn it on. There's fraudulent website warning, and that warns you if a site is suspicious, so you definitely want to turn that setting on. There's also privacy preserving ad measurement, which we talked about, and you actually want to turn this off. I think this is, I don't know if it's a dark pattern, but it's a little bit confusing. Because it says like, don't you want privacy preserving ad measurement? But actually you don't want ad measurement at all. So you want to turn this off so that you are not letting them measure their ad campaigns on the web, collecting more data from you. And then there's camera, microphone access, and location access. And it has ask, deny, and allow. So I usually change it to ask if I think I might want to use that setting within that specific app. So it'll ask for permission, but you can also turn it to allow or deny. Like if I know I need my camera for Instagram, then like I'm okay with it being on. And then check for Apple Pay is helpful if you use Apple Pay, but if you don't, it can drain your battery and just constantly try to get you to add your information. So if you don't use Apple Pay, then you're going to turn that off. And we're going to go over this in Chrome also.
Yeah, so with Chrome, and I'm specifically going to open up my Chrome on Android. So the first thing you have to do is sort of open up the Chrome app. I'm going to do this right here live. Tap the three little dots on the top right, and then you'll see a little pop-down box, and then go into settings. And then once I'm in settings, then you'll see what's on the slide. And so it'll show my account, show my sync on Google services. And then back below that, so there's like the top is you and Google, below it's basics, and it's basically basic settings. The first thing to look for, I think, would be first tap into privacy and security. And in there, just make sure that like safe browsing is at least on. There's two options for enhanced and standard protection. I think both will work out. I think at least choose one of the two. I think enhanced from the description just sounds like you do get a little bit more in terms of them blocking out blacklisted websites. But also you have to share anonymized sort of user data, like user metrics data, the stuff for app developers with Google. So for me, I have enhanced protection on right now. And then as you keep scrolling down, make sure both always use secure connections and do not track in quotes are both on. I think those are important, and there's no reason for that not to be on. And do not track does a little bit of the stuff that I think Privacy Badger does, but I think with varying results, as with all of these sort of anti-tracking things. And then access payment methods. This one just it gives Chrome access to credit card details. It's kind of like the Apple Pay equivalent setting in Safari. And then see if there's anything else you want to adjust. And then after that, you do want to go back out. So go back out one setting to the settings page, and then go down to, I believe it is, let's see, it is scroll down and then hit the site settings thing. So there's sort of settings and then site settings. And then within that, this is where Android, or at least Chrome and Android, stores the location and camera and microphone things that we just talked about for iOS. So just make sure to hit up both of those. They're not in sort of one central location. And then sort of we can be on our way from thereafter. Should we do some questions?
Yeah, I saw one that said somebody was having trouble following along and they wanted to go slower. So the good news is that when you get the slides and the video, I think that'll be easier, because we were describing, there was like two separate slides, and one of them has all of the buttons that you can see, and then there's a description afterwards. So I think that that's something that you will be able to review. And then password managers, are they safe to use? The developer could have access to your password, and whether or not they're trustworthy. Can you recommend one to be good and safe? So we recommend 1Password as one of the options, but in general, there's a lot of precautions in place. So it's not like the developers just have access, like they store them in a safe way. And we definitely recommend them and think that they're safe to use.
We have one question on how do you handle cookie settings. So I'm looking at the cookies settings on my Android, and there's 4 options: allow cookies, block third-party cookies incognito, block third-party cookies, block all cookies. While it might be tempting to block all cookies, this actually ends up making some sites not functional. And so I just do the sort of second last option, which is block third-party cookies. So like if, say, my New York Times account needs to store that I've logged in previously and I don't have to enter my login details or other things like that, then I'll keep that in there so that I can get through the paywall. But blocking third-party cookies mean that, say, like, the kitty litter company that's trying to follow me across the web is blocked. And so that's my recommendation for cookies. Like maybe not all, but the next setting up from there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, because I think what happens sometimes when people find out about cookies and they block them all, then suddenly like everything is broken and they can't use the web the way they want to. Or even if you like clear all your cookies, you might have to retype information that's been saved. And so just something to be aware of. People can kind of figure out their comfort level.
And there's one about allow others to join your personal hotspot. For that, I usually allow, but I usually set a password. Like I don't, so I think that that helps it so that if I need, a friend needs a spot on my phone, is traveling, doesn't have data for whatever reason, they can still get in because I can be like, hey, here's the password. But yeah, but I don't really recommend just giving it out for free with no password.
We recommend, I know that CR recommends that if you're going to share a hotspot in your home, that you have like a guest account.
Hmm.
And we have stories on that. Okay, if we go to the next slide. So Security Planner has links to privacy settings for different popular services, and we just send you directly to the page on these sites that tells you what the settings are and what adjustments that you can make. And if we're missing any, please let us know. I'm happy to add those. And we're going to talk about social media too. And we're not going to go over every setting for every account, but just a broad overview of settings you can change, which we've already touched on a little. You might not want your location to be visible, and that's something you can change. And you might want to change the visibility of your posts. On Facebook, you can make posts public, have them be readable by friends, friends of friends, and only me. And that's actually when I talked about the settings I change, I probably do this the most often because I only want friends to see certain things. Sometimes I want to leave it up, but I don't want anybody to see it. So I switch it to only me. And with Twitter, your entire account is either public or private, but now there's a new feature called Your Circle that lets you post to just a group of close friends that you select. And I do that a lot when I'm just whining about something, but don't want to whine publicly. And you can also change who can respond. And Twitter now even lets you do that after you tweet. Like say you tweet something and it gets really, really popular and you're getting way more responses than you can handle, you can change it to only letting people who you follow respond or not letting anybody who wasn't tagged respond. And you can, another popular setting on LinkedIn and TikTok is your profile view history. So you can change whether people can tell if you've seen their profile. And that's something people ask me a lot because you might want to look somebody up without knowing that you've done that. And so you can change that setting, though it also won't show you who's looked at your profile. So that's the trade-off there. But those are some social media settings. Oh, yeah. Right. And you can even change them after you post, which is kind of cool.
Yep. And then actually, before we jump to this slide, there was a side question about third-party cookies and why I didn't select block third-party cookies in incognito. Mainly, at least in Android Chrome, I think the block third-party cookies includes both in incognito and not. And I think the setting that's just for incognito means that it doesn't block it when your privacy or incognito mode is off. And so that's why it's like I'm going for the slightly more intense in terms of privacy setting. Back to the slide. So we've talked about phones a lot, and obviously, we have to have settings that are on our laptop or desktop computers that we also should look at and make sure that things are keeping us private to the degree that we want. But also similarly, as we have more and more smart devices, it's also important to make sure that, say, if you have a smartwatch, that you also look at the settings for that. Or in some cases, like I've bought my first smart TV recently, and that's its whole other thing of like the companies are not great about preserving your privacy on that. And I think there's been a little bit of research for like, yeah, they kind of try to sell your data a lot because that's again, it's like their way of like sort of handing the cookie jar of like, if I have access, why don't I take it? And so just make sure that you understand what's going on there, and also that maybe you want to get another device or some sort of plug-in thing so that you're not using the native operating system on your smart TV. Like for example, I have a Chromecast hooked up to my Sony TV right now because I think that's a little bit more private. And obviously also as a designer, it just has a nicer interface as well.
Yeah. And some of those some of your smart devices you have to actually update on the device, but a lot of them you can update on your phone or your laptop or desktop computer, which is cool.
Yeah.
Kind of easier sometimes.
And we have some other questions on whether download files on my device or iCloud Drive. Do you have a take on iCloud Drive? I think it's pretty secure. I mean, it's
I like how there's different settings so the cool thing about Apple is that it'll tell you exactly what type of encryption it uses for which type of thing. And I can try to pull up that page, but
yeah.
it's one that I looked at a lot. Like your health
Off the top
settings are
of
very
yeah,
secure.
off the top of my head, I think for iCloud Drive, if you do a lot of stuff there, just make sure you have multi-factor authentication on. And so then, it's not just like somebody can get your password, somebody has to get your password and access to like your phone that gives you the little code or email. So yeah, I think otherwise I think it's pretty safe.
Yeah, and it depends also what kind of backup you use. It's kind of a complicated question, but
Yeah.
because there's whole white papers and pages on it that get a little bit
Yeah.
confusing. But normally if you yeah, I know that there's certain types of data that Apple takes more care with, like health data, and they only store that if your backup is encrypted and it's managed really well. So yeah, it kind of depends. It's kind of a broad question because it depends on like what are you trying to protect that information from, and like what are the sort of details there. So it's hard to kind of give a blanket answer.
Yeah. I think for everyday photos and everyday files, it's fine.
Yeah,
But yeah, there is as Ashley Kong is saying in chat, like there is a threat modeling thing for like, are there specific things you need to keep confidential? It could be for work or personal, and that's its own realm that requires special care in the same way that, right, like confidential files at work get an extra lockbox, right, or get a filing cabinet with a lock.
right. And if you have one of those jobs where you have to keep material confidential, they usually have, an infosec department or people that can help you with those questions too, that are like very specific to that job.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to talk about the limitations of these privacy settings. And unfortunately, none of this is foolproof. We talked a little bit about how platforms can adjust settings when they push out updates, and you might need to check and change them more than once. But even changing that isn't a silver bullet. And I don't. It's kind of like the old adage that if you don't want people to know things, don't put it on the internet. So no matter how private you think it is or what mode it's on, people can still screenshot and share your private posts. So it's just something to remember that even changing your settings isn't a silver bullet. And also, a lot of companies' privacy settings, they might help you control what other people see on your site, but they don't give you as much control over what the company itself collects or how it uses the information, unfortunately. So you can't just change your settings and fix these really large overarching problems, unfortunately. Um, but there are a few things that you can do about it. You can use end-to-end encrypted apps like Signal for information you want to keep private. And you can use disappearing messages and one-time view. So if I'm sending somebody something that I have to text it, I can't just talk to them in person, but I don't want the company to have that information, and I don't want there to be a record of it necessarily because it's a truly private information. These aren't perfect, but they do reduce your risk a lot. Disappearing messages will keep it off of your device unless somebody screenshots it. One-time view means people can only see it once. And again, it's not perfect, but it does reduce your risk. And then what about companies? So first you can delete accounts you no longer use, which we're actually going to do a webinar on that. The company might still be profiting off of details of your personal life, even if you're not getting any benefit from the service. So if you're not using an account, you can just delete it. And you have to actually, we'll do a whole webinar on this, but you have to actually delete your account, not just delete the app off your phone or computer. You have to actually go into your account and delete it. And the next thing you can do, there's about 70 internet companies that publish transparency reports which are public documents that have information on how government and third parties use your information. They'll tell you what was requested. Was it a name and an email address, or how long the person used the service, or the actual content of the account? And there's a nonprofit digital rights organization called Access Now that maintains an index of these reports, and we have a link to those in Security Planner. So that's another thing you can do when you're making decisions about what to use. You can view those reports. And if you're in a state with, if you're lucky enough to be in a state with local privacy laws, you can request information about the data a company has on you, and you can also ask them not to share that information or sell it.
Yeah, I think that concludes our presentation, but we will use the remaining time to try to answer more of some of these questions that have come in. And the first one I'm going to, I guess, address quickly is Margie asks, do you have to use more than one device to use multi-factor authentication? And I would say that usually, right now, for example, I just use my phone as the sort of multi-factor, as the second device. And so it'll be like, if I log into my bank on my laptop, my phone will buzz and ask me to verify. Or if I log into my other social media accounts, I'll have to open an app on my phone to get the code. So that makes sure that it's like, it's not just somebody who's gotten my password for some reason. It's like, it's somebody who also, has phone and laptop and those things. I think, Gail, you probably have a YubiKey, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and we're actually doing a whole webinar on this next week, which is awesome. But there's different ways to use multi-factor authentication, and one of them is an actual physical key, which you can put into your computer, or you can carry it around on a keychain. You can also use it on your phone. And those are really cool because somebody actually needs to have that key to get into your account in addition to your password. So we also recommend apps, which you do put on your phone for multi-factor authentication, but it's, I guess, a little bit less foolproof, and we'll be going into like the reasons and explanation for that really in depth next week. And those are, there's the third option is, which is a little bit less secure, but sometimes it's all people will offer, is like text messages. Like you'll get a code texted and enter that in, but that's a little bit less secure than these other options. And then, yes, somebody asked what CCPA is, and that's good because we mentioned acronyms. So CCPA is the California Consumer Privacy Act. There's also similar laws. There's one in Vermont, and then there's GDPR, which is in Europe. And under these laws, people are allowed to ask for what information a company has on them and get that information removed and stop them from selling it or trading. The definition of sell is pretty broad. Like it includes just trading or giving this information to other companies, but we don't have a national law yet.
I'm going to go backwards one. I think two people asked about the sort of security of password managers and why they're like, I think one person asked, why can't they be hacked like all these other big companies? And it's true that nothing is foolproof, but I think at least my mental rubric, and jump in obviously if you have things to add, but my mental rubric is that often these big companies like have departments that are less secure, or like often it's like hacking happens from social engineering, and so it's like they have employees that haven't been trained as well, and so accidentally give out access. Whereas for the most part, password manager companies are smaller. It's like they're security focused companies, and so they're a little bit better about not getting hacked and sort of having more secure operations in place. Conversely, I also think of it as like, if I don't use a password manager, I can't remember that many passwords on my own. And so it becomes a thing where I just might end up using the same password everywhere. And that's obvious. That's very much a liability because these big websites get hacked, as you said. And so there's also a trade-off for like, yeah, this is sort of the lesser of two evils. But that's also why when we have multi-factor authentication, that means that you need a password and the extra device or the extra text message to make sure that, yeah, okay, even if this one fails, that like somebody can't get into my email because they don't have access to my phone.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it does. It seems a little counterintuitive that you're storing all of your passwords on one company's server, but remember that their whole job is to keep that secure, and they have end-to-end encryption, which means that even the password manager company cannot see your password. And they also hire third-party firms to audit their products and make sure that they're safe. And they take a lot of measures to take care of that. And then as far as like how like other companies, like everybody's getting hacked, why aren't they getting hacked? A lot of companies get hacked because of reused passwords, like or just easy to guess passwords. And so this kind of prevents that from happening. And uh, and yeah, like you mentioned, it lets you use a different unique password on each account, which is great. And helps you. It's also will help generate them. And then I use 1Password as my password manager. There's other ones. I think that's the main one we recommend, but there's others that also scored pretty well in our privacy and security testing. But you can't just you have to have both the password and a different 16-character code if you're using a different computer. So there's a lot of steps that they take to make sure that doesn't happen. So, okay, let's see. We have some other questions.
Okay, we've got one from about one-time text messages or disappearing texts for Android and iOS. I think my recommendation would be to download the Signal messaging app for that. Because I think there may or may not be, I'm misremembering like whether say iOS's native messaging apps has it, but I think, I mean, it doesn't work on Android. So it's like if your friend has an Android, you're sending a text message, like there's all sorts of complications and settings that aren't obvious. So I feel like the general advice, the easiest advice would be to download Signal, where disappearing messages are a key feature. And so they're prominently featured. And then also within that, like the one-time text messages will also be more obvious and surface sort of to the two users, whereas trying to find the specific settings on these other apps.
Yeah, Signal was what I was thinking of when I talked about disappearing messages and one-time view. So that's one of the apps. WhatsApp also has disappearing messages, and it's also
Oh
end-to-end
yeah, it's new.
encrypted.
Yeah.
Though they do share some metadata with their parent company, which is Meta, the company that owns Facebook. But it is end-to-end encrypted. It uses the same encryption as as Signal does.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Let's see. We've got some more password manager follow-ups. One person's asking whether keeping a password protected Excel file on your laptop is good. I actually think that's fine. I just personally, my only issue with that might be like if I needed to get the password from my mobile phone, it's like a little bit harder to log into Excel or open a spreadsheet on mobile. And so I think I don't recommend that usually because it's more inconvenience. And so people might do it less. But if that system works for you, then like I think that's totally great. And then similarly, is Apple's keychain a valid and safe password manager? What do you think?
I mean, I do like there's keychain and there's also people sometimes save passwords in their browsers. And I think it depends on if you're looking for interoperability. Like, are you going to be logging into these things from your phone? And is it also on your phone? Like if you have an Android phone and an Apple computer, like there's different.
Yeah, true.
So that's just something to think about.
Yeah. Apple's keychain means you have to use Apple devices all the way.
Exactly. I don't
Yeah,
even know if
wonderful ecosystem if you're into it. um, and
I
then
got a disable AirTag notification on my iPhone. Can this be related to my car and or should I be concerned? I actually got one of those too, and it turned out that somebody I was traveling with had an AirTag in their suitcase. Um, But we actually have pages on Security Planner about like stalkerware and could somebody be following you with a device. And so those are some possibilities. It could just be that somebody you're traveling with has an AirTag, or it could be that somebody left one in your house or is actually tracking you. And the cool thing about it is that they're physically easy to find. And so you can actually physically search for them and find them, or just ask the people you're with, like, oh, do you have, one on you? And then there's ways to get them to make a loud sound, and just lots of different ways to kind of figure that out. Are programs that hide your fingerprint worthwhile? I'm not sure I'm familiar with those programs.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think given that we don't have any more information from you right now, I would say just make sure to look them up and see what's behind them. I think there's a lot of false advertising or overblown advertising in this space. And so sometimes it actually doesn't do very much, but it just like looks good, or they have like a good marketing. So I would say the only thing I would say is let's do our research on those before.
Yeah. How much does Google track you? Every time I use an app, there are always ads. Can I turn these off? I think that you can stop the ads from being targeted based on your search data, but I don't think you can turn them off completely. Unless you switch to different browser. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when you see ads, it just means that somebody is placed an ad on their website and they're trying to get money from it. It's not necessarily like Google is sort of tracking you across the web. Like it can try, but when we do enough of these settings, I think their ability to track us is limited.
Right. Okay, someone's wife was looking at an app in her phone, asked her if she wanted to buy something, and then she saw the company had her credit card number. It was filled in. That they're saying the only way they can figure they got that information is from Google. Sometimes you might store that. Like some people can store that on the website when it says like store my credit card. Like I know I've done that before, and then they will still ask you to enter those 4 digits. So that might not be that your information got stolen. It might be that it's saved. You've saved it somehow, maybe without realizing it.
Yeah, yeah, I think I agree. Though if you are worried about that specific card, you can always sort of get a new credit card number, like call the bank, get a new one. And yeah, that'll give you the peace of mind as well.
Okay, DuckDuckGo, yes. We have Amir in the chat who's a big DuckDuckGo user. I also use it on my phone. It's a different search engine like Google that you can use that has more privacy features.
Okay, I think we're probably close. Any last questions before we wrap up? I think we're good.
We do have some housekeeping at the end.
Yeah.
Yes, so we will wrap up. So we will be sending you a follow-up email that I know that people asked about, and we're going to have a couple more events you can sign up for. And if you, we have 2 more events lined up. Yeah, like I just mentioned, let us know what topics you want in future workshops, and check out Security Planner for more tips like this. And thank you so much for joining us. And we'll send you some of this information, and you can go back and look at it and send us any questions that you have. And thank you so much for joining us, Jason.
No, thank you for having me. And yeah, it's good to meet everybody and answer as many questions as we can.
Yeah, and we have action.consumerreports.org/events in the chat, and that's when you can sign up for the remaining 2 events, and then go to securityplanner.org to make a customized plan. And maybe we'll see some of you next week.